Okay, this is the video on the homework for lesson 7.1 day 2. Hopefully you took me up on my offer to visit this YouTube page. If you didn't, I guess you wouldn't be here anyway, so I wouldn't know. So anyway, let's go ahead and work through these problems. So the first one we have is x squared minus 17 is equal to 8y plus 39. And of course, if you're still kind of confused on these concepts, or you find yourself kind of really lost as to what I'm doing, maybe go back and watch the actual lesson and see if you can kind of get up to speed on this video. So, first thing I'm going to want to do here is let's go ahead and try to, because we only have an x squared, we don't have another x term, let's go ahead and add 17 to both sides. So let's go ahead and add 17 to both sides. Okay. So what that does is that has this 17 go away, and as a result I get the x squared is equal to 8y plus 39 plus 17, which gives us 56, Okay, so our next step here is, remember, we always want to write stuff in standard form. But notice we're so close, right? We're so close, except this is in parentheses and this doesn't have any number attached to it. So what we're going to do is, let's go ahead and use that trick that we kind of learned. That this is x squared technically, but technically we can just rewrite it as x minus 0 squared is equal to, and that's our left side, right? So we kind of get that form, that standard form that we want. And then, of course, on the left side, we know that 8 and 56 are multiples of course, 8. So let's go ahead and extract that. So that's going to be y plus 56 divided by 8, which is 7. And so that gives us the problem in standard form. So that's great. So what we do is, first we have to say, okay, is this a vertical or horizontal parabola? Well, we know that it's vertical because the x is squared here. So this tells us that we are dealing with a vertical parabola. Right? That tells us that we're dealing with a vertical parabola. Also, another thing to keep in mind is this 8 is actually equal to 4p, because in the general form, 4p is in the front of the term that is not squared. And so if we divide by 4 on both sides here, we get that p is equal to 2. And so that makes finding all this other information pretty easy. We just say that the vertex, is just what is attached to the x, which is of course 0. Sorry if the camera's shaking a little bit. And the y of the vertex is going to be what's attached to the y, so negative 7. The focus is just going to be what is, so the focus, because it's a vertical parabola, is going to keep the same 0, but the y is going to change. Remember, it's going to be whatever is in the y plus the p. So negative 7 plus p is, of course, negative 5. For our axis of symmetry, remember, it's just going to be whatever the x variable is, but this time it's a line, so rather than writing a coordinate point, we're going to say x is equal to 0. And for my directrix, again, remember that the y is going of the directrix, which is y is equal to, is going to be, instead of k plus 2, which is the p, it's going to be k minus 2. So negative 7 minus 2 is going to be negative 9. And that is it. So one highly advisable thing to do is that when you do these problems is, you don't have to typically, but let's go ahead and graph this out just because the visualization is going to help us to picture what's going on here. So anyway, the vertex is 0, negative 7. Obviously, they're not 7 ticks, so let's go ahead and go by 2. So negative 2, negative 4, and etc. So that means that this vertex is going to be at, which is at 0, negative 7, which is about in between there. The focus is going to be at 0, -5, which is about right there. Axis of symmetry is going to be this thing that cuts straight through. And the directrix is going to be at -9, so at right there equals -9. So then we got this thing. And that's pretty much it. And for that problem. So let's look at number 2. Okay, number 2 is a little more nuanced, is not as straightforward as 1 was. So for number 2, what we're going to want to do is let's go ahead and try to get the y's on one side and the x's on the other here. So let's go ahead and add 12y to both sides. So that's going to give us, that goes away, we get 12y on the left side minus 33 is equal to x squared minus 6x. All right, so while that's great, the thing is, though, is that, again, we want it in standard form. But what we notice is that on the right side here, we almost have a quadratic equation. But we need to add a number here. We need to add some constant so that I can make this a quadratic equation. And remember, we want it so that when I break it down into the two pieces, that the two numbers that it breaks down to are the same, so then we can square it and then get it in our standard form. So what I do, so what I do to figure out what number I'm going to add to it is, again, remember, I'm going to complete the square. And I'm going to take the b over 2 squared, which in this case is going to be b. So b is the number that just has the x. So -6 over 2 squared. So -6 over 2 is, of course, going to be, -6 over 2, of course, is going to be 3. I don't know why that took so long. So then you square that and you, of course, get 9. So we're going to add 9. But of course, I'm going to add 9 over here. I also have to add 9 to the left side. I can't just add something on the left. So that gives me 12y. 33 plus 9 is, of course, -24. Let me rewrite that down here. Okay. So now we can use Xbox to solve this. So we just draw our Xbox. So we put the 9 and the -6. And again, what gives us, multiplies the 9, but would give us -6. So -3 and -3. And for some of you, that calculation might be a breeze. You might even be able to look at the equation itself and just pretty much see what it is. That's perfectly fine, and that's great. I want you to be very comfortable with this. So if that's the route you want to go, you don't want to really draw this anymore, you just can kind of tell, that's totally fine. But if you start making mistakes again, maybe consider going back to that way. Okay, so we have this. So again, multiplying something by itself twice is the same thing as squaring it. So that is going to be, so 12y minus 24 is equal to x minus 3 squared. X minus 3 squared. So we're almost there. The only thing we notice is that this left side isn't in the standard form. But of course, we notice that we have two multiples of 12, 12, and 24. So let's go ahead and factor out the 12. So we have y minus 2 is equal to, let me make that 2 a little clearer, is equal to x minus 3 squared. And now we have it in our standard form. So that, and also, we know that it is a vertical parabola, again, because the x's are the thing getting squared. So, for a vertex, what's attached to the x is the 3, and then what's attached to the y is 2, so we have 3, 2. The focus is just going to be the x value of the vertex, but again, we have to add the p to get the y of the focus, so 2. So we look over here, 12. So again, this number is 4p, so 4p is equal to 12, thus p has to be equal to 3. So 2 plus 3 is going to give us 5. I like to separate stuff. The axis of symmetry is going to be just the x coordinate, but it's a line, so x is equal to 3. And last but not least, the directrix is going to be the opposite calculation. So rather than 2 plus p, we're going to say 2 minus p. So that's going to be y is equal to -1. And of course, I want to graph this out. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 2. That's the vertex. The focus is at 3, 5. The axis of symmetry is at x is equal to 3. And again, that's the axis of symmetry. And the directrix is going to be that is -1. Did I draw that focus? Ah, no, I didn't. It goes up here. Focus goes up here. Okay, 4 is a different type of problem than the ones we've done, because in the ones we've done, again, we were given an equation and then asked to find all the information about it. In 4 through 6, we're going to be given some information and then asked to solve or use kind of the information given to us to figure out what the equation is. So it's a different process, but it's not that bad. It really isn't. Okay, so let's do it. So the focus, we can see. Wait a minute. We don't know what focus formula to use, again, because we don't know if it is a vertical or horizontal parabola, right? It depends. So the way we can figure that out is, let's go ahead and draw the focus here. So 1, 2, -1. And then the vertex is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, -1. So that's the vertex and that's the focus. It's a pretty big distance. And so anyway, so what this looks like is, again, because the vertex wants to eat the focus, so it's going to have something that looks like that. So the focus is going to actually be h plus pk, which is equal to -1 as given by the problem. So again, standard equation of the focus and then what the focus is in the context here. So what that tells us is that h plus p is equal to 2 and that k is going to be equal to -1. Okay. So the vertex, when we get the vertex, we should jump for joy. And the reason being is because we know that h is -4 and that k is -1. So just by getting the vertex, that's going to give us a lot of the information. That's an equal sign, by the way. That's going to give us a lot of information that would have been normally hard to get, but for us now, because we have the vertex, a lot is already given to us, so it makes our lives way easier. So the only variable we don't have is p. And so there's two ways to figure out what p is. The first one, and the more kind of algebraic way, is we take this equation we were given, so h plus p, and we insert what h is, so -4 plus p equals 2. And then we just solve for p. We just add 4 to both sides, and we get that p is equal to 6. The second way, of course, is you could just use the graph, right? Remember, p is the distance from the vertex to the focus and the directrix, right? It's the distance from the vertex to the focus. So if we've drawn it out, we can just count the distance. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that matches this. So that also works. So p is equal to 6. And from all that, we can use our equation. Again, because it's a sideways parabola, we want the sideways or the horizontal parabola equation, which is going to have the y on the left side. So y minus k, so minus 1 is positive 1 squared. That's going to be equal to the p times 4, which is 24, And then, of course, the right side is going to have the x because the y is over here. So that's going to be minus negative 4 plus. And so that is our answer because we were asked to write the equation. It's nice we've already graphed it out so we don't have to worry about that. Alright, so let's all breathe a sigh of fresh air as we are on the last problem we were assigned. You're more than welcome to do these two, and probably extra practice never hurts, but you are only expected for homework to do 1 through 6. Okay? So let's go ahead and look at this one. So it's very similar to this last one, so it's pretty much going to be the exact same process. And typically during homework times, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't do both because obviously you've already gotten one that's very similar to it, so you should be able to do this one. But because as a reward for visiting the YouTube channel for the first time, I'm going to go ahead and do this one. So, okay, so we have the focus. And again, we have to figure out, okay, so what focus formula do we want to use? Well, we know this opens left, so we're not going to use the vertical one here. We're not going to use the vertical one. We're not going to use the hk plus p. We're actually going to use the other one, which is h plus pk. And of course, that means that that is equal to 1, 3. So, the focus is going to be h plus p is equal to 1, and k is equal to 3. We know all of that from that formula. And again, because it opens left, let's go ahead and say that we have the equation. Again, rather than the x, we're going to say y minus k squared. So that goes on the left because it is a horizontal parabola. 4p x minus h. So there's our formula, or that's the equation that we're going to be filling in. Okay, so again, we want to fill in the x and y values here as well as anything that we know of the parameters so we can solve for stuff that we don't know. So what we'll get is, so let's plug in what is contained here. So we have 11 minus k. We know what k is. K is 3 squared. We have 4p. Then we have x is negative 14 minus h. And again, we don't want to just plug in h in there because then that would give us an equation with two variables. So let's go ahead and subtract p. So that'll give us h is 1 minus p. And so let's put 1 minus p there instead of the h, right? Because it's the same thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and divide. Let's get rid of, well, before we do that, let's go ahead and simplify this. So we have 11 minus 3, and that gives us 8. And of course, 8 squared is going to be 64. It's going to be equal to 4p, negative 14. Let's go ahead and distribute this negative as well. So negative 1, and then plus plus, so positive p. So again, we have this 4 on both sides. We have this 4 and a multiple of 4. So let's go ahead and divide by 4 to get rid of the 4 on the right. And notice something. So 64 divided by 4 is going to be 16. Notice we've done that twice now, right? So on the left, whenever you do this, they're probably going to give you a number on the left that's a multiple of 4. Keep that in mind. So that if you don't get a multiple of 4 on this left side, you might have done something wrong, so you might want to check your work. It is possible now that it could maybe not be a multiple 4, but as we've seen from these two problems and the ones we've done in class, that is not the case. And again, what you have to remember is all of these problems were written by human beings, right? Humans wrote these problems. They wanted you to understand the concept. And sometimes they use very nice numbers so that you don't have to deal with fractions and you won't get frustrated. But, so that's kind of a rule to keep in mind, is that if you're getting nice numbers, typically, especially on homework, it's probably a good indication that you're going in the right direction. Not a very solid rule. We don't want to live by that rule completely. You don't want to live and die by it, but just something to keep in mind as you are doing your homework. Okay, so we get that 16 is going to be equal to, put a little dotted line there so we know it's separated. 16 is going to be equal to p times negative 15. Let's go ahead and subtract that negative 14, so that's negative 15, plus p. So then let's go ahead and distribute the p like we did up here. So everything is going to pretty much be the same as the last problem from here on out. So we distribute that p. We want it to look like the quadratic equation, so we'll subtract 16 from both sides. That cancels. 0 is equal to, let's see, p squared minus 15p minus 16. We do our little Xbox thingy. We get that negative 16 over there and negative 15. So all it breaks down, so that would multiply to get negative 16 and negative 15. And typically, if what you're adding to is 1 less than what is multiplied, it's probably just going to be the number times 1, so 16, and especially negative 16, 1. So that will give us 0 as x. Or sorry, p minus 16, p plus 1. And that's going to give us the solution that p is equal to 16, or negative 1. Now again, we have two cases here. The lazy way, of course, as I've said before, is you could just say, hey, it's just negative 1. Probably not going to be 16 away. Fair enough, and that actually happens to be true. Also, this is a strange thing. If it opens to the left, so it's different from here. So if it opens to the left, so if the parabola, which I guess I can draw in here, right? So if this opens to the left, and that would be my focus, so that would mean that it would be this way. And so opening to the left implies that it is a negative number. Now if it opens to the right, that would imply that this was a positive number. So keep that in mind. And so p, that's the distance. So that means that must be the vertex right there. And so we can also figure out h. H is 1 minus p. So 1 minus 1 is going to be h is equal to 2. So we can write our equation. Y minus 3 squared is equal to negative 4 x minus 2. And that's it. You are done with your homework. Congratulations. So anyway, again, a few things I'll point out here. Notice that 4, again, I'm pointing that out. Notice you do have to do the quadratic formula here, or the quadratic problem here, so notice that. Also notice that it's the process that you go through for both of these is different, but it's slightly similar. So just keep all of those things in mind as you work through these types of problems.